Guess who's coming to dinner? Guess who's coming to dinner? Today is Monday. And today is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it, because we're here talking about it. And today I'm really honored to have this young lady with me. We have a few things in common. We have New York in common. We have Delta Sigma Theta in common. And to me, I think she's a showstopper. So let me introduce to some and present to others the one and the only Miss Betty Baye. What's
Hey,
up, my
girl.
sister?
I am good. I'm
How you
good.
doing? Hey, look, I'm glad to be here with you. I had something special for you. Happy birthday, Betty. Birthdays come but once a year. Happy birthday, Betty. Your birthday's almost here. Happy birthday, Betty. It is your time of year. There you go.
Well, girl, you are the first one to say happy birthday to me.
I know, and
I
about 100
love,
days early.
yeah, but I love being a spring baby. I told him I don't care what the calendar says. I
Right.
always love to be born in the season of the resurrection.
Oh,
It's
I hear
either
you.
Good Friday, Easter. It works for me. And what I love about being an April baby, and there's many of the women in my family, for instance, are Aries, but I really love the idea that things are starting to bloom after
To
the
bloom.
winter. The plants are coming out and everything. And actually, it must have something to do with my attitude because I am blossoming. After the long winter, the pandemic, and everything, I've been out the last couple of days trying to walk a little bit because it's a little
Hmm.
warmer.
Yeah.
This is right up my alley. And I'm glad to be alive, to come through the
Yeah.
pandemic. I've
Yeah.
had my
We're
vaccines.
blessed.
Most of my family, we got through it. We had one death, my sweetheart, his stepson was one of the early victims of COVID back there in New York. But my family, we got through it. And we lost a cousin, Tommy. We think it was COVID, but we're not sure. But
So
we think
tell
it.
me, Betty, how'd you get to Louisville from New York City, from Harlem?
Ask me, because I sure didn't plan to stay here 30 some years.
Uh,
But I came here. The Courier Journal recruited me.
okay.
Louisville was somehow on my. I don't even know how Louisville got on my list, but the first place that ever flew on an airplane was to Louisville, Kentucky. I
Wow.
worked for the Presbyterian Church. I was a kid. I was like 17, and I was a secretary. And they had a General Assembly here. So I came to Louisville, Kentucky. I had never stayed in a hotel, never flew on an airplane. And I remember being just terrified. And then the next time I came back to Louisville was years later in 1981. The National Association of Black Journalists had a convention here.
Okay.
And I came to Louisville to the convention because I was working for a small newspaper in New York. So I came for the convention. And I remember my friends and I, there was three of us in one room. It was a guy and two girls, and we would put him out and get dressed. We had like no money. And
Right.
I remember looking out of the guardhouse window and looking down at Kingfish when it was on 6th Street.
Right.
And girl, I thought it was like an expensive restaurant. It was all lit up and everything. And I said, boy, I sure like to go over there to eat. And we at the convention, then all the newspaper companies had big receptions. So we would go from one reception to the other and get all the grapes and cheese and the stuff and bring it up to our rooms because we had no money.
Right.
And I met this woman there because, me, mouth open, hands up. And I met a woman named Carol Sutton, who was the first top woman editor at the Courier Journal. And Carol liked me, and she stayed in touch with me for the next 3.5 years. And then she said they had an opening here in Louisville, and she invited me to come for an interview. So I came here in 1984. And I remember I was glad to come because I don't know whether people in Louisville appreciate it, but the Courier Journal was one of the 10 best newspapers in the country. It
Yeah,
had
I
a
don't I don't
tremendous
think I don't think
reputation.
the city knows that. But
Yes,
there are newspaper readers in this city, let me tell
yeah.
you.
So coming out of New York, I would not have come out of New York for anything. That's my home. I love New York. but I wanted to come to the Courier Journal. Plus, let me tell you how Louisville seemed to be on my plate when I wasn't planning it. My instructor in grad school at Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism was a man named Norman Isaacs. And years ago, he had been like an executive editor at the Courier Journal. So he was my main writing teacher. And so I was aware of the Courier Journal, as most people in the news business were. But the Courier Journal was the first paper to have a newspaper ombudsman. There was just a lot of pioneering things. The Courier
newspaper, Journal, what? Say that again.
Ombudsman. What's is somebody who is like a negotiator for the readers. When the readers call a complaint, there's this person they call the ombudsman. Other papers adopted it, but the Courier was the first one to have it. When I got here, the Bingham still owned it. And it was like a great big plantation, not just for Black people, white people too, because we had free membership at the Y. We had a full service cafeteria. We had good benefits. They had a daycare center for the employees' children. I mean, it was just, and then you got, besides your vacation, you had 2 days off every year for your birthday. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Paid
unheard of
your birthday. So the Courier was a good newspaper, but it was also an interesting time to come to Louisville because, and between the Courier Journal and the sister newspaper, the Louisville Times, which shut down in '87, we had so many African Americans on the staff, which was also unheard of back then. I think that we had a record number of African American journalists, and I mean almost all the photographers were Black.
Photographers,
journalists, photographers, the clerks. There were a lot of African Americans there, and the Courier Journal was kind of like a stepping stone for people to go to the New York Times, the Philadelphia Inquirer, the Philadelphia, Washington Post. So the Courier Journal was the place to be. But me being a little older than most of my colleagues, I wasn't about moving every 2 years because journalists move a lot. And so when I got here, I would go back to New York like 13 times a year because I just told myself I did not live here. I just worked here. And I remember Janice coming, and I got an apartment out on Zorn. It was a condo, like a tri-story condo. And Merv Orbisman's former wife, Joan, helped me to get the apartment. And I lived next door to Gloria Neal, who was married to Senator Neal, his first wife. And
I went to Kentucky State with Gloria.
Yeah, well, Gloria was my next door neighbor. And look, I had a tri-level apartment condo that I was renting. And I thought, oh my God. So I got here to get the cable on, the phone on, before I got here. I had an apartment, cable, phone service, everything. And nobody had me write a check. It was like, okay, you coming? The lady let my furniture stay in there for a month. I said, what kind of place is this where they don't take deposits or nothing? I said, this is not New York. And so I stayed there, but then next winter it was cold. I was on the end unit and I said, oh, I got to get out of here. But I thought that I was only going to stay for 2 years. And then I remember one day Merv Orbisman said to me, you have to mentally unpack. And, I had to tell myself that I really lived here. And then I went to Brown Memorial Church, CME Church over on Chestnut. Because my grandma said, when you don't know nobody in town, you go to church, So I went to that church, met people, Sherry Butler, who some people know, Sherry Lyons, her sister Beverly, Evelyn Waldrop, who worked for the city, was there then, Miss Waldrop. I made some of my dearest friends at Brown Memorial Church. And then I would hang out with Bob Douglas and Laura Douglas and Carmen Weathers, and they'd be arguing politics all the time. And Bob would have all these parties at his house and stuff. And what I loved about it, I lived next door. I finally bought a house on Chestnut Street. I lived there for 10 years. And I lived next door to May Street Kid. And all the, political people be coming to see May. And I loved it. Lois Morris. And at that time, before Black people got these little corporate jobs and stuff and started having all the derby galas and stuff. The derby was in people's basements and backyards and stuff. And
Lois
I
Morse
thought,
used to have an out of sight
yes,
parties.
I was
I
so glad to
came
go to her
from Las
party.
Vegas to go to Lois
I
Morse's
think I wrote
parties.
about it in my book. But I loved it. And I loved it. I just love that idea of it. Honey, Club Cedar was like my second home. Club Cedar was jumping, and in the back, in the summertime, you sit out there and have a fish sandwich or some chicken, and Joe's Palm Room.
Yes.
So it was for me coming from, New York, a big city. This was like a big small town, like a family, and
Right.
and you could go out as a woman by yourself, and I never felt afraid. I'd go to Joe's alone or whatever, and
Everybody. I went
someone would
everywhere
say,
alone.
"Yeah, let me walk you to your car, sis. Let me take you to your car."
Right.
And you could just sit up in there by yourself, with no date or nothing, and feel very comfortable.
Right.
And everybody was lovely. And I think because I worked at the newspaper, people that grew up here were like so proud of me, being a Black person at the Courier
Right.
Journal.
Right.
So they would say, "Sis, I like that thing you did." They
Right.
give me story ideas of whose son went to jail and the this, the, that, the. So, and then I met like a lot of the civil rights people. So Ann Braden and Maddie Jones and all of these people, because at that time, you remember the Klan. I don't know if you were here or not at 84, but the Klan was active in the Jefferson County Police Department. So they had Klansmen on the police force.
Okay.
And this is after busing and all of that. And
Right.
and for
That's
some
when they
reason,
started to have a lot of murders.
yeah, and the racial stuff was going on. So I got to cover that. And then, like I said, once I met the civil rights people, Ross Jessup, uh, uh, let me see, just different people who led the NAACP and stuff, it was on and popping here. And I thought, I remember what my daddy told me, sometimes you can be a bigger fish in a smaller pond.
In a small
And
pond.
for me, in Louisville, I would have been in New York, and be a journalist, but I don't think I would have connected or been so loved and embraced by the Black community. The Black community
You
here,
have a different kind of exposure here.
yeah.
It's
And the
like it's
people,
almost like everybody knows you.
everybody knows you, and they, like I said, I'd go in Joe's, I'd go in Club Cedar, I'd go in, and I'm not a drinking person, but if I drank, I could have got a lot of drinks. Because people would say, "Sis, you want something, you want this and that." And it was just like a family kind of thing. And I
It's
absolutely,
our social climate here, or back in the day, was
yeah,
always off the hook.
yeah, yeah. Well,
I
I
could
think,
come home from Las Vegas and just like you said, I come home, I said, Mama, I ain't spending no money. I
no, no.
couldn't even offer somebody else something. No, 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 no.
Well,
And
I got my first
love.
house through Joe Hammond, Joe's mom, Joe Hammond, and Catherine Guest. And Catherine Guest, who was Joe's partner, she was one of my early people here. And I was working like nights. So I would go to Catherine's house and sit up in Catherine's house in the daytime. And I would help Catherine with paperwork and stuff. And I'd sit up there with her and her husband over there on I think they lived on 43rd Street. And Catherine had like a step down living room. And she had a wall of stuff where her refrigerator looked like it was in the wall, made part of the wall. She had fabulous clothes. She was always giving me clothes and stuff. And Joe Hammond and Catherine, they just took me like a little sister. And so I feel like I hear people talk about Walnut Street. I miss that. I wasn't here for that. But, I listened to Ed Hamilton and I listened to, what's his name, who was at the Kentucky Center for the Arts, Ken Clay. And they would tell me the stories about Walnut Street. But I felt like when I came in the 80s, I was getting the tail end of a beautiful era in Louisville to be Black. And
but you still had those people that grew up with it here to share those experiences with you.
Exactly. And when I got off from work on Friday night, I did not come nowhere east of 9th Street. I stayed in the West End.
Right.
And it was just like everything, going from house to house. And then I met, a few years later, I met Helen Frierson. And I called her Mama Helen. And
Okay.
everybody know Mama Helen was into a little bit of everything.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I
I hear
would
you.
hang with Mama Helen and her cousin Aunt Genevieve, and I would sit up with them till 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning. And Mama Helen would tell me them stories about the Black Derby from back in the day, when
Yeah.
all the celebrities would come to Louisville, and they couldn't stay in the white places,
Right.
and how the clubs was on and popping,
Right.
and the Elizabethan, and I mean all kind of. It was I loved.
Mr. D's Club Louisville. Look, I grew up with
Yes,
all of that.
I
But let me
missed
say
a
this
lot of
to you.
that.
One thing is, you actually lived in the house that my aunt lived in.
Are you serious?
No, because my aunt lived next door or 2 doors down from May Street Kid, but it was like they were like 2 rows. It was like the fourth house from the little alley,
Yes, yes. Well,
and
that
it
was
was on the end.
yeah. There was a house on the end, and then there was next to that. That's where Sherman and Beverly Morrow lived when I got there, and then Rochelle Goatley, who was
Okay,
in the NAACP,
okay,
and then next door to me, it was empty for a long time, and then and I lived at 2306,
okay.
and so it was
I'm gonna pull up this picture when we finish and show you, and you
yeah.
tell me if that's not where you
I
live.
wrote a story about that house, and then Miss Kidd was on the other side of me.
Right,
And
right.
then I think Lenny Lyles' mother lived on that block, Mina
Oh, it
Daniels
was
and Jesse.
Chestnut Street was all that.
But that's what I loved. And when I got here, child, I thought Beach and Terrace was townhouses. I said, that's the projects. I'm like,
Yeah.
they
Thank you.
got
Thank
grass
you.
and a little yard and stuff. So I'm like,
Thank you.
wait a minute. So when they were
Listen,
telling
let's
me,
go here. Let's
but
go here. I'm gonna take you somewhere else.
okay.
Tell, say there's a young lady listening right now that is aspiring to be a journalist. Give us some pointers of where to start and a path to take.
Well, I tell you the first thing, you got to be like me, and maybe you too. I'm a storyteller, and I
Okay.
love stories. And when you grow up like I did, we didn't have a TV for a long time, so the entertainment on Saturday night was my father and his friends.
Okay.
And they migrated
Okay.
from the South to New York, so they told all these stories, and they tell the lies and all that stuff that they did.
Hmm.
So I always loved storytelling, but I didn't
Okay.
aspire to be a journalist because I didn't know nobody that did that. But
Hmm.
I would say you gotta love being a storyteller. And then
Okay.
I think you have to have an idea what kind of journalist you want to be. Like, in other words, you're an entertainer, you're a singer and stuff. There are people who specialize in covering entertainment.
Okay.
Is sports your thing? You cover sports. If civil rights is your thing,
Okay.
you have a sense of what you wanted to do. I came into journalism later, but I had come out of the civil rights movement,
Right.
which sort of
Okay.
slowed me down because a lot of people didn't want to hire me because I was, but my point is that you need to have a sense of what you wanted to do. And I knew that what I always wanted my journalism to be was a love story to Black people, because I always
Ah.
felt like we were misrepresented. And I wanted to tell the stories about who we were, how we love, how we party, how we celebrate. That was my mission in life, was my
Wow.
my career, was to tell
Wow.
our stories. And I would always say, if you wanted to read a lot of Black pathology and shooting and killing and all of that, you have to read that somewhere else. If I've got one column to write a week, I'm not going to spend every column beating up on people that's already been beat up on. I
Right.
want to tell the other side of that story,
You
because
want
I
to do
grew up
something uplifting.
uplifting. So you have to decide what you want to be. Now, some
Right.
people want to be journalists because they want to be sensational. They want to get famous. They want to do all that. And you can get famous being a journalist. But if you want to make a whole lot of money, this is
Hmm.
probably not for you, not right away anyway.
Right.
And then the other thing is that I never learned grammar in school. I don't know why I don't, but I know how to write because I read a lot. So I
Okay.
put in the commas and the semicolons,
Where they're supposed to be.
right. And I came along with other people that's what they studied to be journalists. They studied to do all of that. Now my bachelor's degree is in communications and English,
Okay.
but I never learned English, like, people diagram sentences and stuff.
Right.
But I always had good conversation,
Okay.
you know, and you got to be a conversationalist. People have to trust you to be
Yes.
to be a good journalist, because you don't feel comfortable telling everybody your stories. So you have to know how to also keep confidentialities. And the main thing is you have to know how to write.
Right.
And you have to understand that lots of times that first writing that you do is a draft. Somebody's going to come along and edit it. And that's the problem for a lot of people. They think, well, if I write it this way, that's the way it's going to be. But we all need editors. So you have to be prepared to be edited and get your feelings hurt. When I wrote a story when I was in grad school with this man who was at the Courier Journal, I wrote a story I thought was fabulous. And he read the first 2 paragraphs. He looked at me. He said, Baye, what is this shit? Hurt my feelings. I thought the man was like discrimination. I said, he just doesn't like me because I'm Black. And then I saw him like tearing up the white people. I said, oh, he's equal opportunity. So then I could be a good student because I knew that he wanted me to be a good writer. So the thing is to be a good writer, but to be a good storyteller, to be a good talker, and to be a good listener, and to be observant. Like, in other words, I read a story the other day, and it's like old-fashioned journalism. Yeah. And the person, you know, I was taught when I interview you, for example, I'm looking at you now. If I'm interviewing you, I'm going to see those flowers behind you. I see that picture. I see the color of the wall. I see what you have on, because you want to be descriptive. But now with all the shorthand journalism, a lot of that is gone. You look at my house, you see the walls, you see the art, you know what I'm saying? So the thing is that when you write about me, because you look to see, well, look, oh, he got his family's picture on the desk. Oh, his wife is pretty. You observe those things so that when you do your story, we used to call it putting the color in. You bring in color. You give the person some humanity. So for me, I love that. And I would say, if you want to be a journalist, start now. Be an observant. Be an observant. Even as you're talking, you're looking, you're seeing, you're hearing, you know. And I like to sit down in restaurants and listen to the people behind me, what they talking about, because there might be a story. You know what I'm saying? And I'll tell you one thing about that. I know you want to go another way. But one time I was getting ready to do a piece for Essence magazine. And the editor was talking to me about doing a piece about sexual abuse. And so we sitting there at a table in, La Famille restaurant on 125th Street on 2nd Avenue upstairs. Had the best short ribs anybody ever made. And we're sitting there talking about the story and how I'm going to approach it and all of that. And there's this couple sitting behind us. And on the way out the door, the woman slipped me a note and said, call me. She overheard our conversation. She had been terribly abused by her father. Wow. And he became like the center of my story. We didn't name names. Her father was some famous person. But the point was that she heard that story and she just slipped me a note and said, call me.
Ain't that something?
So that's why you don't know, you know what I'm saying? And you don't.
And the trust issue, like you said, people have to, in order to give you information and make sure that you disseminate that information in context.
Yeah.
You know, they have to trust you.
Right. And when people talk about journalism, they talk about being objective. Well, nobody's objective. The thing that you have to do as a journalist, you have to be fair. You got to be fair.
Gotcha.
And sometimes you got to talk to people who you find are personally abhorrent. You wouldn't be in a room with them. You know what I'm saying? Some of my best stuff was interviewing the head of the Klan here in Louisville. And he would call me up and say, Miss Baye, I don't know why he would talk to me. He said, Miss Baye, I don't think you better come out here tonight because I can't guarantee your safety. And I'm like, well, damn, if the Klan man told me not to come.
I don't think you should go.
So be curious. Be curious. Write as much as you can, whenever you can. And learn how to listen and learn how to let people trust you. And that's what got me over in Louisville. How I made my reputation was because people trusted me to tell me their stories. And if they told me they didn't,
isn't that a wonderful feeling?
God knows it is.
It's a wonderful feeling to be trusted. People don't understand just kind of what it's like. I mean, you've touched me like you don't know. But the fact that what it feels like when people take you into their confidence, because then they can do nothing but love you.
Exactly. And the people here in Louisville, and I had a lot of critics, but mostly I'm saying that even when I had tough days and the racists were attacking me and all of that, honey, I go to church and they say, girl, we love that story you did.
Yeah.
And one girl, I was in Joe's palm room and I had written this Mother's Day piece about my mother. And I had my mother's picture in the column. They put my mother's picture in there. And she said, she came up to me. I don't even remember her name. She came up to me. She said, you know what? She said, I hope you won't mind. She said, but I cut out your mother's picture and I put my mother's picture there because you said what I would want to say to my mother.
Oh, wow. How sweet.
You see
How
what I'm saying?
sweet. Wow.
And I got that a lot. We put your column up on the refrigerator. You know,
Right.
Betty, some people, they got more of my stuff than I do. And my mother really loved your piece. And my father, honey, he wouldn't see no Thursday. He wouldn't read your column and stuff. That's when you know you're blessed. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? It's
Well,
like,
my
oh,
mother
my
told
goodness.
me about you.
Yeah, child, your mother didn't take no stuff, no tea for the fever. Miss
You're the
Emily,
second person that said that about her.
no, you know how old I am to my no tea for the fever. You know how old that is. But
Girl,
I'm
no.
just saying that it was I learned to respect my elders even when I
Yes.
didn't agree with them, and I
Yes.
knew that before. And I love the senior. I love the elders. I love talking to them, and that's why I would say I could sit with Mama Helen for hours. Beulah
Well, let me
Reed,
say this about Louisvillians. Louisvillians are easy to talk to. And
some
actually
of them.
they
Mhm.
open well, but
But the
they really
senior,
are. I mean, once
yeah,
you get to know them, they will open up,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and they will bring you in. And it's not easy for them to bring you in. Let's let's
hmm,
let's be
yeah,
clear about
yeah,
that. But once they bring you in, then you're in. Then
yeah,
your love the love and respect that they have for you is showered upon you. Louisville's got um, we've got wonderful Southern hospitality.
yeah. And
You
it
know,
was different. And when my friends would come to visit, like from other places, I take
mhm.
them right on to Joe's and Club
That's you
Caesars,
went straight to
and they loved that
Joe's.
because they felt like this was whoever heard. And I said, I told them, I said, what's so interesting? They open up new clubs and they fancy and they modern, and people go there for a minute, but
And then
everybody
they
go back
come
to
right
Joe
back
and
over
Club
to
Caesars
Joe's. Well,
because
I told Betty before I went on the road singing, I see when I decided that I wanted to be a singer, I thought the epitome was going to be when I was able to sing in Joe's Palm Room.
yes, my
I
God.
thought, that was going to be, I had made it,
And the
but
bands, how about the
oh,
bands? And
oh
what's his
yeah,
name? Our own Luther Mondrose. You know
Vic
who I'm talking about.
Frison.
Honey, I would just sit up there and I'd be like, sing it, Vic, sing it. I love Vic Frison. And when I had my TV show several years ago, I interviewed Vic up there in Maryland, because he
Mm-hmm.
moved to Baltimore.
Right.
But Vic Frison, and every time he comes back to town, I try to make any show when he's here because I connect him to my early days in Louisville. And girl, I was even at the Elizabethan. People try to act
Oh,
like they were
girl,
there.
go ahead
Check
on.
your pocketbook for weapons.
Betty, let's go to Betty Baye, the author.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the Book of David.
Okay.
Tell
Well,
me, it's a love story,
yes,
and
it
it's
is.
your life story. So, give us a summary about the Book of David, but give them a little teaser so they can go to Amazon and look it up and purchase it, and
Exactly.
have you in their home with them.
Yes. And invite me to their book clubs virtually and stuff like that.
All
But
that good stuff.
I wrote this book. I didn't know. I knew I was going to do another book. I have two other books, but I knew I was going to do a book. But I went to New York City for a neighborhood reunion. I didn't
Okay.
want to go. I was in DC and partying and with my girlfriend. And they said, you can't be this close to home and not go to neighborhood reunion. So I went back to where I grew up. And I'm there at the reunion and everybody's gathered and they grilling and carrying on. My sisters are there. But I had told my sisters I wasn't going to come. But anyway, I ended up coming there. And I was there for about an hour or so. And then I saw this man coming through the gate of what we call the Big Park. I grew up down on First Avenue and between the East River Drive and First Avenue and the
Okay.
project, the East River Projects. And I looked at this guy. I said, David Rivera. And he said, Betty Winston. And that was in 2010. And that was my childhood crush. I hadn't seen David in 50 years.
Oh,
And
wow.
so as it turned out, David and I got together and he moved to Louisville. He was in Pittsburgh. He hated it. And this is like the older people love story. Because after you get a certain age, people think that, all the love is gone. But
Right.
we were in our 60s. We had so much fun. I loved me some David. And I loved him when I was a kid, and I loved him. He was Puerto Rican, and we would dance our Latin music, and on Saturdays, and we traveled, and we did all kind of things together. And then in 2013, we were doing one of our road tours to Florida and Georgia and all of that. And we were at Tybee Island, and he had this lump in his neck, and it turned out it was cancer. And anyway, after David was diagnosed, we went on the cancer journey. So David's son lives in Georgia. So when I could no longer manage it alone, we went to Georgia. I went to Georgia, and we tried hospice at home. And but David ended up dying in the hospice there in Atlanta.
Okay.
Our Lady Perpetual Help Home. So the book opens with David dying and what happened and all of that. And then I go back to, because my girlfriend, who's also a writer, said, you didn't see David for 50 years. So you really can't tell his story. Right. You can only tell his story with you. So I tell you the story. I tell you our love story. And then I tell you the story of how I love New York and how I grew up and went to the Apollo and, all of that.
Right.
And then in the end, but like I said, I didn't plan to write a book. And then it was like I was, after David died and I came back to Louisville, I was in my house and I was just so sad because we were so happy. Right. And this voice just came to me and said, I want you to tell somebody about me. I want you to tell somebody about me. And it was so insistent. And I thought that it was David, saying, tell somebody. I said, ain't nobody will tell nobody about you, please. But then I felt like it was the voice of God that was saying, I want you to tell somebody how I kept you and how I kept David. And so the book, at the end of the book, is my journal of when David was dying, the journal that I kept and what it meant to me when people called me and prayed for me and prayed for David and, the whole thing. And what I got out of that was that old saying about love lives beyond the grave. The grave does not have the last word. And just the idea that even though David is dead, nobody can take what we had away. Right. What we had, and that will never change. David will never get older than he was. He will just always look the same because that's what we have. So now I felt this urgency. And then I met Julia Royston, who is a sister, because I was going to go to a big publishing house. And Julia's a sister who's local, BK Royston Publishing. And I met her through Hannah Drake. And she really pushed me to finish the book because I would write and then I would stop. I would write and stop. And she said, girl, you got to get this book done. And I met Julia, I think, around October. And by the time she finished, we had a book. She pushed me right to the end. So, and when you're a writer, you make a decision. You want to go with a major book publisher or you want to go at somebody with a smaller publishing house. And this way I got to support a sister, a Black woman that has a publishing business. Right. And so we support each other. And I was on her talk show recently, and Julia's a singer, a songwriter, a publisher. She's a woman of many talents. And so my book is my love story. Her name
is Julia Royston?
Royston, Royston. Her publishing company is BK Royston Publishing. And she has published a lot of people, but I love the idea of supporting the Black woman business. I do. And but my book is how I loved and was loved by a man, and how I loved my people, how I loved where I come from. Right. You know what I'm saying? Right. And then the journal of being on the cancer journey with somebody you love and seeing them die. And when you see the sand running out in the hourglass and know that you cannot love them back, you cannot love them well because God is in charge. Right. And then at the end giving thanks to have been loved like that. Because
Yeah.
a lot of women
A lot
have
of people never get to know love like
right.
that.
And you'll love this. Every chapter in my book is a song title because David and I always played music. And when David
Okay.
was quiet and sick, I would play music for him on the computer. So every chapter, and the here's the book,
Let me
but the
see.
chapters, I don't know
Okay.
if you can see it real
Move it
good.
over. Yeah, right there. Yeah. The
And
Book
that
of David.
and the
Okay.
cover picture is where we grew up in New York,
In New
right
York.
on the East River Drive. But
Okay.
the thing is that every chapter is a song title and by the person I like it. So the chapter 1 is Closer to Heaven by Phil Perry. Chapter 2
Okay.
is When I Met David, Hello Stranger by Barbara Lewis. You know,
Hello,
hello stranger. Right.
stranger.
Chapter 3 is Apaga la Luz. It's the Latin version of Teddy Pendergrass's Turn Off the Lights, the
Oh,
first time that we got to be together. And then chapter 4 is Al Green's You Ought to Be With Me. 5 is I Blame You, because all my friends said when I met David, they said, girl, you look different. So I had Lettucey's thing, I blame you. They say I'm walking different, talking different. And then when we got together, ain't no stopping us now. McFadden and Whitehead, and it goes on. And then
oh,
the
that was lovely the way that you
right.
picked
And the
songs for
last
titles.
chapter is Etta James's Miss You. And that was her version of Mick Jagger's Miss You. And she
Okay.
talks about some Puerto Rican boys, her and her girlfriend bringing over some whiskey, and they're gonna have a good time. So the idea of the songs is because we love music, but as a writer, you also need a hook. So each chapter became an essay that these songs have a relationship to. So somebody
Is
told
that
me,
it down there?
yeah, and you got to say the Book of David, because I think there's
The Book
another
of
one
David.
by Betty Baye.
Okay.
Yeah, the Book of
Okay.
David.
The Book
Not,
of David. I'll fix
not
it.
East Harlem
Don't
Love
worry about
Story.
it.
Yeah,
Look, I'm learning how to do all this, Betty, but
I hear you, girl. Look, I'm not technological. You see me sitting up here, girl.
how's that?
The Book of David at Amazon, and they got to just say by Betty Baye, and they'll
Okay.
get that if you're telling them that.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
the Book of
Well, go
David.
on. But you know what? I understand it's I have to
But I'm just telling you, I never knew
infringe
love like that.
on that old love. Like you
Yeah,
said, old love.
and
I
you
got
know what?
married at 60 for the first time.
I remember when you got married, and it's nothing like. Let me tell you something. When I know that many of my girlfriends were so happy for me,
Yeah.
because what it is when you say I never knew love like this. I've been married before. I've been married twice, in fact. But
Mm-hmm.
that was different. This was mature love. When you got mature love, and
Right.
what it is that there's just an honesty to it, because it's not a lot of pretend. I mean, you're not children.
Well, and I didn't have to, when he asked me to marry him, and I had this, we both have our story, our love story, how
Yeah,
we met, kind of thing.
yeah,
And I thought about it. I said, okay, I'm 60 years old, and I've seen a lot of life. I've given away some things. I didn't get nothing back for it.
yeah,
I didn't get no name, no house, no car, no. You know what
yeah,
I'm saying?
yeah.
And so here is. I wasn't looking because I had just really resigned
Right.
myself to it being me and my mother when I moved back home.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, so here's this man, and he's asking me to marry him, but he wants to be a minister. He's in the ministry. And I'm
yeah.
saying, uh, that one. So I go home and I tell my mother that he asked me to marry him. She says, well, what's the problem? I said, I don't know about being no minister's wife. She
Hmm.
said, well, Nancy Wilson married a preacher. Look, she knew where to go. She went for the juggler.
She went right there.
She went for the juggler. But I didn't take a long time to say yes, because it was a no-brainer to me.
That's where I
You know
was
what
with
I'm saying?
David.
You know when you like somebody, in the first 5 minutes, they trying to
Mhm.
figure how to get to the cookies. And
Exactly.
we didn't wet. I said we have fed them, wed them, bred them, and all of that in the first 5 minutes. We know.
Yeah.
We
Yes.
know. They don't
Well,
know.
I didn't even need, we didn't take a lot of time. And I'm glad I didn't, because we
Hmm.
didn't get to have many, many years together. You know what I'm saying? If I had wasted a whole lot of time, but I'm grown. So I
Right.
figured I could
Right.
do what I
You
wanted
know.
to do. David was single. I'm single. Let's get together. And I always would tease him. I said, boy, I can't marry you because you have bad credit. So, you know, so,
Some of us would never get married.
yeah, but I figured that we probably would have. But I tell you what, and I feel like, I really do feel like, because his family told me he was so happy. I really feel like
That's all that matters.
David was my gift. And because I don't have children, I
Right.
never had responsibility for taking care of somebody else.
Right.
And through David, I learned what unselfish love is. I learned about sacrificial love. I
Yeah.
learned to love somebody when they're falling down and they, you know, and they can't get up. And he had a nickname. He called me Moodles. I mean, I called him Moodles. He called me Moo Moo. And when he was in that hospice and stuff, he would say, Moo Moo, Moo Moo, as long as he knew that I was there. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like God gave him to me to take care of him, to help
Well,
him to get through this
that's a
world.
blessing because
Yes,
God gives us what we need.
exactly. And
He
God
gives us
needed
what
me
we
to
need.
have some responsibility.
Okay.
Because until you have to take care of somebody who can't help themselves, like a baby can't take care of themselves,
Right.
you have to be responsible. At some point, I had to be responsible for David. And he was so strong and so brave and all of that. But I just feel like, and it's just like that book, I felt like it was God saying, tell your story, tell
Yeah.
them about me. And
Right.
maybe somebody might get something out of this book,
Right.
something to
That's
help them on the
that's
journey.
that's what it's all about. I want to go to another part as we kind of get close to closing this out. That a piece that I did, my musical piece that I made you a part of. Um, and I don't know if I ever really told you, like I should have told you, how much you made it all work. My girlfriend's piece.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah.
You are so
I've got,
talented
for the
anyway,
audience that
gifted.
doesn't know, huh?
You are gifted. Because you also sang for my club. You remember when
Right.
you
I
sang
came
for
and
the
did the
Chums?
for Chums with Woody
Yes.
Woods.
Yes, you
Right.
did.
And that girlfriends had to have uh, when I did it one time I did it in Las Vegas, I had a narrator. And when I was here, I was saying, Betty Baye, I said she would be great to be our narrator. And just the little different sets that we had on the stage that you're um, maneuvering around and sashaying to, you're over here with one of the girls singing, and then we look up and you're over here and you have your little parts to say and where you shine, and then you bring everybody else in and out. It was like, it was
But
very
y'all was
special.
singing. I wasn't singing nothing because God didn't give me that gift. I know how to
But
stay in my lane.
he gave you some showstopper stuff, and you
Are
have
you
that.
going to revive that? Are you going to do that? Because I think after the pandemic, people would love to see
Well,
something
I'm gonna
that
tell you
shows
what
us
I have in
together.
mind. They stopped doing the Ebony Fashion Fair, right? And
Yes.
I'd like to use girlfriends to take that place for all those Black organizations, social and service organizations that use the fashion show for their yearly fundraiser.
As a fundraiser, yes.
So I kind of sent my stuff over to the Bridgmans after they did Ebony and said, well, if you think about that, I've got the show in place, intact,
Yeah,
all the
yeah,
music ready to go. I just need to call my girls up and say, we need to rehearse for a month or so. All the music's written and hit the road and be able to book it. So
yeah.
that's what I want to do with
Well, Judy
girlfriends.
Bridgman did buy the Ebony magazine. I'm
Yeah,
not sure it's going to be digital, but
it's digital.
I think that tour was a fundraising tour, and it was interesting. I never went to Ebony Fashion Fair in New
Get
York,
out of here.
but I went
Not
to
in New
Ebony
York, but you
Fashion
went
Fair
here.
in Louisville. Honey, it was a big social event
It was. It was. That was my mother's event of the year.
at Memorial Auditorium. Yes, I
Memorial
did.
Auditorium every year, Thanksgiving weekend,
Yes,
every
baby, it
year.
was fabulous. It was always fabulous. And I just, like I said, I never dreamed that I would be a writer. And let me tell you about, speaking of Ebony and Jet, Black people don't care where you were published or nothing. When you make it in the Ebony magazine,
You've
for black
made it.
people, you have made it. I was in the Ebony magazine cheesing, and then I was in Jet. And honey, they ran all through the projects and saying, "Little Betty's in the Jet. Little Betty's in the Jet." And my mother and them were like many celebrities because I was
Oh
in the
yeah,
Jet
it's big to
magazine.
do, big
It
time.
was a big to do. So I wish Junior Bridgman and them have a lot of success. I don't know, what the book is going to, how they're going to manage it or anything. And I still
Yeah.
do some freelancing. So I would love to maybe, write an article in the new Ebony, we'll
Oh, that would
see,
be great.
you know,
I spoke with his daughter, Eden,
Eden. Yeah.
and I sent her a clip of girlfriends. It was one of the clips I had because I didn't film. The girlfriends that we did at the Clifton Center is the only one I've not filmed.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. But I sent her a clip of the girlfriends that I did in Las Vegas and the pictures and everything that went along with it. And I need to send you some of those pictures so you can have them for yourself.
Yeah.
But I want to say, Miss Betty Baye, you rock. You rock,
Girl,
my
thank
sister. And
you. Thank
I
you.
knew it was going to be so easy to talk to you and for you to share your story because a lot of times people don't get to tell their whole story. That somebody's asking them 1,001 questions. I wanted
Yeah.
to give you an entree and let you have the floor.
Particularly if you're a
And
storyteller yourself, you be getting everybody else's stories. Yeah. Well, I
well,
appreciate the
and it just
opportunity.
lets me know more about the people that I think I know. You
Yep.
know, but I know that you have a big heart, and the city loves you, and you've done wonderful things as far as your writing and your journalism in this city. Your love story, just telling it to me today, I understand about that when the song that you made me think about when you talk about oh love. Lou Rawls used to have a song called "When Love Is New."
Oh, when love is new. And
When
that's right.
love is new, I love that. So
Honey,
anyway,
look, I have my days, honey. I got my Alexa here and I play my Johnny Hartman and I play my Natalie
Johnny
Cole and
Hartman was my daddy's favorite singer.
I love Johnny Hartman. And I knew that if Johnny Hartman was a white man, none of them could touch him.
Uh,
Johnny Hartman
yeah,
was most
yeah.
fabulous singer.
He didn't
And
get
I
the
had,
exposure he should have. Yeah,
yes, honey, look, music in this pandemic, I don't know what I would have done without it. It takes the edge off for me.
yeah.
When the news gets to be too much, I just say, Alexa. If I tell her
Turn it
right
off.
now, I say, Alexa, play Natalie Cole.
Yeah,
Alexa, play Nancy Wilson.
right.
Alexa, play. You know what I'm saying? And I even bought me the old fashioned record player because I still got a whole bunch of big old albums,
Albums.
33 and the third albums in the
Yeah.
garage. I said, honey, when I go up out here, my family's going to kill me between my books and my records and all this junk in here. They're gonna have to clean it out. I don't have no energy to do none of that. So they're gonna have to throw my stuff away or whatever they're gonna do. But God is so good. And
Yes, he is.
I just feel like God does everything for a reason. If my father was alive, I'd never be in Louisville because my father didn't want nothing to do with nothing with Confederate monuments or none of that stuff. He would have said, "Oh hell no, that's why I left Virginia." No. But Louisville has been very kind to me, and now when people go, "You going back to New York?" and I'm like, "And live where?"
Yeah,
Because if the rent in the projects are $1,500 a month, imagine on the open market what you're paying.
right. I lived in
So,
the Riverton.
child, you was upscale
I know.
up there
Look,
by
I
the
lived in
Lincoln
the
Project.
Riverton, but I used to tell my mother, I said, but mama, when you come down and you cross the street, you in them the projects.
Yeah,
But the
Lincoln Projects,
Riverton
baby.
was on another block and it had this whole
Yeah, that's where
different aura.
that's where all the middle class Negroes live,
Right,
and the Riverton looked like a project, but
right.
it had the middle class people in there.
Well, that's where the stars live, Betty.
That's
The
what I'm telling you.
Eckstein and everybody who was uptown.
Right,
Down in
The
Washington,
Riverton, Lennox Terrace,
Lennox
those were
Terrace,
the two
exactly.
places, and then later Riverbend. I mean,
Right.
that's where they
That's
lived.
the name of it, Riverbend. I had a girlfriend that lived in Riverbend, and I could never remember the name of it because
Riverbend.
Riverbend was right next door to the Riverton.
Yeah, and Riverbend came later, but the Rivington
Right.
is the classic place where you had middle class, singers and entertainers.
Right.
And that's what I loved about Harlem back in the day, baby. You be walking down the street, you see most anybody, and you
Right.
go into Chicken and Waffles. What's the name? Chicken and Waffles and place. All the celebrities being there, all the bands and the singers.
What
Like,
was the restaurant on 145th, the cafeteria where you got the oxtails?
mm,
Right off Broadway. Um, mm,
that wasn't
mm.
one of my hangout spots.
Copeland's.
Oh yeah,
Copeland's.
Copeland. Yes,
Yes. Yes.
Copeland's. Like I said, Harlem was on and popping. I mean, just the Club Lido where I would go and get fried wings. I remember when Sylvia's restaurant
Sylvia's. Yeah.
it was a stand. It wasn't even a whole restaurant. It was a countertop and a few booths.
I
Okay.
hear you.
And Sylvia cooked her butt off, and La Famille up on 125th Street.
Yes.
I
Yes.
mean, all these hole in the walls with that Southern cooking, and people hung out, and then you had the jazz clubs, down the
Yes.
steps, and in the brownstones, you go downstairs, and the clubs
Right.
were on 145th Street. That was
Right.
my dad's stomping ground. In fact, when Daddy died, we took him to Benter's funeral home. We took him back uptown and let the procession ride through Harlem, so my daddy could one more time ride through Harlem, because he would tell those stories about Harlem, and talk about dancing with my mama at the Savoy. And I mean, we would just be
You
entertained.
had history, yours and theirs. But I
Yes.
want to say, Miss Betty Baye, I thank you so much for joining me
I
today.
thank you, Janice. And you better tell me where to share this, baby, so I can share it with my friends.
I'm gonna send you the link.
Okay,
They can share it on YouTube after we go off. It'll
darling.
come. I can send you the link. You can share it. Tell them to subscribe to Jantastic Productions, please. Very much. Thank you.
Okay, just put all of that in the note, and I will pass it on.
And let me know if you're gonna do something for your birthday. Maybe I can meet you out with my mask on.
Child, look, I don't even know what I'm doing. Look, I got the shots, I got my shields, I got my mask and everything. But
No,
I'm not.
we can meet somewhere. We can stay. We can be outdoors.
Well, the birthday is the whole weekend. So you want to
Okay.
just sing one more note to me for my birthday? You my first one.
Girl, listen to her. Happy
You say
birthday,
happy
Betty.
birthday.
Birthdays come but once a year. Happy birthday, Betty. Your birthday's almost here. Happy birthday, Betty. It's definitely your time of year. Bloom, mama, bloom.
Say that, baby. And with the blues, with that blues lick on it, girl, please, I'm scared.
I know.
See? Oh
I
my
got to do
God.
something different. I
I
love you.
thank you. Love you back.
Take care, Soror.
All right, sweetie.
Bye-bye. All right, there we are. Miss Betty Baye. Now, if you didn't know, now you know. You know about the Book of David, the book she wrote about her life and her love affair with her friend David, who's gone on, and her time in New York City, up in Harlem. But she's an icon in Louisville right now, and we're blessed to have her. As you can see, she's got a birthday coming up, so she better call me so we can meet. I'm not going to Club Cedar though. I'm gonna tell you that right now. My husband would not allow it. But I just want to say thank you for everyone for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed that. You couldn't help but enjoy it if you know Betty Baye. And if you didn't know Betty Baye, now you do. So, on behalf of Guess Who's Coming to Dinner on Friday, this Friday, I haven't decided if I'm going to have my guest on Friday. But next Monday, we're going to have Mayor Fisher. And then that following Friday, we're going to have Mr. William Starks, that owns Starks Realty. And he's also one of the co-owners of the new Louisville Extreme football team. So get ready, because we're not finished, but we're finished with Women's Her Story Month. Miss Betty Baye was my showstopper, my final performance for Women's Her Story Month. Hope you enjoyed it. And it's dinner time somewhere. Guess who's coming to dinner? Bon appetit. See you next time.